I never believed in ghosts. Not really. Sure, I loved a good scary story, but I always dismissed them as just that, stories, nothing more. But after what happened to me and my wife, Anna, in our new house, I don't think I'll ever be the same again. It started like any other house hunt. We had been searching for months, tired of renting, ready to settle down in a place we could truly call our own. When we found the house on Hollow Creek Lane, it felt like fate. It was old but charming, with ivy creeping up its brick walls and a massive oak tree in the front yard. The price was suspiciously low, but we chalked it up to the house needing some work. I remember standing in the living room during our first walkthrough, sunlight streaming through the dusty windows. Something about the house made me uneasy, but I ignored it. Anna, ever the optimist, saw nothing but potential. "We'll fix it up," she said, squeezing my hand. "Make it ours." So we signed the papers and moved in a month later. That was when everything started. The first thing we noticed was the sound. It started as faint creaks in the floorboards at night, which we dismissed as the house settling. Then came the knocking, rhythmic, deliberate. 3 slow knocks at the front door, always at 3:13 a.m. At first I thought it was some neighborhood prank, but every time I checked, no one was there. One night I waited by the door, bat in hand, ready to catch the prankster. But when the knocks came, I flung the door open to nothing but the cold night air. Anna began to hear whispers. I'd find her in the kitchen, staring at the wall, her face pale. "Did you say something?" she'd ask, but I hadn't. Then came the shadows. We saw them from the corners of our eyes, dark figures moving just beyond our vision. At first I thought it was just tricks of the light, but soon they became impossible to ignore. One evening, as we sat in the living room, Anna gasped. "Did you see that?" she whispered. I turned to follow her gaze, and my blood ran cold. A figure stood at the far end of the hallway, just beyond the dim light. It was tall, unnaturally thin, its head tilted at an impossible angle. And then, it was gone. We should have left then, packed our things, and never looked back. But we didn't. One night, I woke up to the bed shaking. Anna was still asleep beside me, but something was wrong. My breath turned to mist in the air, the room freezing cold. Then I heard it, a raspy whisper, so close it felt like it was coming from inside my own head. "Get out." The next morning, we found deep scratches in the hardwood floors, as though something with claws had been pacing the room while we slept. Anna was the first to break. "I can't do this," she said one night, tears in her eyes. "Something doesn't want us here." I wanted to argue, to say we were just imagining things, but I couldn't lie to her, or myself. That was when we found the crawl space. We had been in the basement, searching for the source of an awful, rotting smell that had started seeping through the house. That was when Anna noticed a section of the wall that didn't match the rest, wooden planks hastily nailed together. With a crowbar, I pried them off, revealing a dark, narrow tunnel. "Jesus," I muttered, covering my nose. The stench was overwhelming. We hesitated, but something compelled us forward. Step by step, we crawled deeper into the tunnel, the air growing colder. Then my hand brushed against something soft. I scrambled for my phone's flashlight and pointed it ahead. That was when we saw them. Bones, dozens of them, some small like those of animals, others human. And then the whispering returned. "You shouldn't have come." A wind rushed through the crawl space, though there was no possible way for air to move down there. The wooden planks behind us slammed shut, trapping us in darkness. Something was in there with us. We don't remember how we got out. One second, we were trapped, the air heavy with something unseen. The next, we were outside on the front lawn, gasping for breath. The house loomed behind us, its windows dark and empty. We left everything behind, drove as far as we could that night, and never looked back. Days later, I tried to research the house's history. There were no records of the previous owners, no listings. It was as if the house had never existed at all. And yet, sometimes, in the dead of night, I still hear it. 3 knocks. At 3:13 a.m., waiting. It's been 6 months since we left that house, but I don't think we ever truly escaped it. We moved across the state, renting a small apartment in a busy part of town, far away from empty streets, old houses, and the things that lurk in the dark. At first, we told ourselves we were safe, that the past was behind us. But some things refused to stay buried. Anna hasn't been the same since that night. She doesn't sleep much anymore, and when she does, she wakes up screaming. I'll find her in the middle of the night standing by the window staring at nothing. When I call her name, she looks at me like she doesn't recognize me. And then there are the knocks. They followed us. At first, they were faint, barely noticeable over the sounds of the city, but they grew louder, more insistent. Always 3 knocks, always at 3:13 a.m. One night, I decided I'd had enough. I sat by the front door, waiting, my hands clenched into fists. My heart pounded in my chest, every second stretching into eternity. Then, knock, knock, knock. I swung the door open. No one. Just the hallway, dimly lit by the flickering overhead light. I should have closed the door, locked it, gone back to bed and pretended none of this was happening. But instead, I stepped into the hallway. The air felt different, thicker, heavier. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly, casting strange shadows on the walls. The hallway stretched longer than it should have, the doors to other apartments seeming further away. Then I heard it. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from behind me. I turned, expecting to see someone, but the hallway was empty, and yet the footsteps grew closer. I ran back inside, slamming the door shut. My breath came in ragged gasps, my hands shaking. Then, knock, knock, knock. But this time it came from inside the apartment. The next few days were a blur. Anna barely spoke. She wouldn't even leave the bedroom. She said she felt it watching her, whispering to her when I wasn't around. I started seeing things again, shadows moving in the corners of my vision, the air growing cold in certain spots of the apartment. I'd wake up to find our furniture moved, our kitchen chairs stacked in impossible ways. Then one morning, I woke up to find Anna gone. I searched everywhere, called her phone, ran through the building, banged on our neighbors' doors. No one had seen her. But then I noticed something. The closet door in our bedroom was slightly open. I stepped closer, my breath hitching in my throat. The smell hit me first. That same foul, rotting stench from the crawl space in the old house. I pulled the door open, and there she was. Anna was sitting on the floor, her back pressed against the wall, her eyes wide and unblinking. Her skin was pale, her hair damp with sweat. She was whispering something over and over again, her lips barely moving. I dropped to my knees beside her. "Anna?" My voice shook. "What are you doing in here?" She slowly turned her head toward me, her pupils blown wide, her expression empty. Then she whispered, "It found us." I called an emergency therapist. I didn't know what else to do. Anna refused to talk about what happened, but the look in her eyes told me enough. She was terrified. That night, I made a decision. I had to go back. I had to return to that house. I drove alone, leaving Anna in the care of her sister. The highway stretched out before me, the journey feeling like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. When I finally reached Hollow Creek Lane, the house stood exactly as we had left it. The ivy still clung to the brick walls, the windows still empty and black. But something was different. It felt alive. The moment I stepped onto the porch, I heard it. Knock, knock, knock. Not from the door, but from inside, deep within the house. I stepped inside. The air was thick with dust, the stench of decay stronger than ever. The walls seemed to breathe, the shadows stretching unnaturally across the floor. Then I heard my name, whispered, hissed, coming from the basement. I knew what I had to do. I forced myself down the stairs, my flashlight flickering in the suffocating darkness. The basement was just as we had left it, the broken wooden planks leading to the crawl space still gaping open like a mouth. I hesitated only a moment before crawling inside. The tunnel stretched longer than I remembered. The air was damp, heavy with something wrong. But I kept going, my hands brushing against cold dirt and brittle bones. And then, I saw it. At the end of the tunnel, deep in the shadows, something was waiting for me. A figure, crouched and trembling, its limbs too long, its fingers scraping against the walls. It slowly lifted its head, and I saw its face. My own. It grinned, its mouth stretching impossibly wide. "You brought me home." The world lurched, the air twisted, and then I woke up. I was in my apartment, in bed, Anna sleeping beside me. For a moment I thought it had all been a dream, that none of it had really happened. Then I heard it. Knock, knock, knock. I turned to Anna, but she was already awake. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "It let you leave, but it followed you back." And in the corner of the room the shadows shifted, waiting. We didn't sleep that night. We sat in bed, backs pressed against the headboard, staring at the darkened corner where the shadows writhed. They didn't move like normal shadows, didn't shift with the light. They pulsed, expanded, breathed, and then, just as the first light of dawn crept through the blinds, they were gone. But we knew better. It wasn't over. For the next few days, we tried to act normal. We went through the motions of everyday life, pretending we weren't waiting for something to happen. But the signs were everywhere. Anna stopped eating, stopped talking. I'd catch her staring at the walls, whispering under her breath, her eyes unfocused. The knocks came at random times now, not just at 3:13 a.m. They followed me to work. I'd hear them on my office door, in the bathroom stalls, even from inside my car while I sat at a red light. And the worst part? I started seeing it. Not just in the corners of my vision anymore, full on, standing in doorways, watching me from across the street. A figure that looked like me, but wrong. Its head tilted too far to one side, its grin stretched too wide. It never moved, never chased me. It didn't need to. It was waiting. One night, I woke up to find Anna standing over me. Her face was pale, her hair tangled, her eyes wide with something I couldn't understand. She wasn't blinking. "Anna?" I whispered. She didn't answer. She just lifted a finger and pressed it to my lips. "Shh," she breathed. Then slowly, her head turned toward the closet. The door was open, and in the darkness beyond, I saw it. The thing that looked like me. It stepped forward. I don't remember screaming. I don't remember grabbing Anna and running from the apartment. All I know is that we ended up in the parking lot, barefoot, shivering, as the building loomed behind us. The lights in our unit flickered violently. A shadow moved past the window, then knock, knock, knock. It was at the front door of the building, and we weren't inside anymore. We left everything behind that night. I don't know how to explain what happened next. We moved again, this time without telling anyone. We left the city, went somewhere remote, somewhere the thing wouldn't find us. We didn't tell our families where we were going. We changed our numbers, and for a while, it worked. The knocks stopped. The whispers faded. Anna started to get better. She smiled again, ate again. I started to believe just for a moment that we had finally escaped. Then one night, as we sat by the fire in our new home, a familiar sound echoed from the front door. Knock, knock, knock. Anna's hand tightened around mine, her nails digging into my skin. I didn't move, neither did she. We just sat there, frozen, listening. The door creaked open on its own, and in the doorway stood. Its head tilted, its grin stretched wide. It didn't say anything. It didn't need to. We understood. You can leave a house, but some houses never leave you. We didn't run this time. We sat there, unmoving, as the thing wearing me stood in the doorway. The fire crackled between us, casting flickering light across its face, my face. It didn't blink. It didn't breathe. It just watched. And then, without a sound, it stepped backward into the darkness. The door creaked shut behind it. Anna turned to me, her hand still gripping mine so tightly I could feel her shaking. "What do we do?" she whispered. I didn't have an answer. The days passed in a fog. We didn't talk about what had happened. We didn't talk about it, but we both knew it was still out there. We kept the doors locked, the windows shut, but we knew it didn't matter. This wasn't something we could keep out. It was waiting. And then, one night, I made a mistake. I woke up to find Anna gone. The bed beside me was cold. The room was silent. A sense of wrongness pressed against my chest, thick and heavy like I was drowning in the dark. Then I heard the whisper, "Come find me." It was her voice, but I knew better. Still, something pulled me forward. I stepped into the hallway, my breath shallow, my hands trembling. The entire house was dark except for a faint glow coming from beneath the basement door. I didn't remember leaving a light on down there, but when I reached for the doorknob, I found it ice cold. I turned it anyway. The basement was different. The walls weren't the same unfinished concrete. The floor wasn't smooth. It was dirt. Old, damp earth, the kind that smelled of decay and rot. And ahead of me, standing perfectly still in the dim light, was Anna, or something that looked like her. She smiled, but it was wrong, too wide, her teeth too sharp. "You found me," she whispered. Then she took a step forward. I backed away. "You're not Anna." Her smile widened. "Of course I am." Her voice was Anna's, but beneath it, there was something else, something deeper, something ancient, something hungry. The basement, the ceiling seemed more than pressing in. The shadows stood and pulsed. Then she spoke again. "You brought us here." I didn't wait to hear more. I turned and ran. I found Anna outside, standing in the middle of the road, barefoot, staring up at the sky. Her eyes were glassy, distant. She didn't react when I grabbed her shoulders, shook her, begged her to look at me. Finally, she blinked. "Where?" Her voice was hoarse, like she hadn't spoken in hours. I pulled her into my arms. "It's okay. We're leaving." She didn't argue. We left that night. We didn't pack. We didn't tell anyone. We just got into the car and drove. But as we pulled onto the highway, I glanced into the rearview mirror, and in the distance, standing in the middle of the empty road, I saw them. A figure that looked like me. A figure that looked like her. Smiling. And then, at the exact same time, they lifted their hands and knocked against the air. 3 times, waiting. We drove for hours without speaking. Anna sat curled in the passenger seat, staring blankly out the window. She hadn't spoken since I found her outside. Her hands were ice cold, and when I touched her, she flinched like she didn't recognize me. I kept my eyes on the road, but my hands were shaking. I couldn't stop thinking about what I had seen. Those things, our reflections, standing in the road, knocking on nothing, waiting. Had they always been there? Had they followed us all this time, waiting for us to notice? I didn't know. But I knew one thing for certain. We couldn't outrun this. By morning, we reached a cheap roadside motel, the kind with flickering neon signs and rooms that smelled like cigarette smoke and bad decisions. I paid in cash, didn't give my real name. Anna sat on the bed, unmoving. "Anna," I whispered, kneeling in front of her. "Talk to me." Her lips parted, her voice barely audible. "I don't think I'm me anymore." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" She looked at me then, and for a moment I swore I saw something shift behind her eyes. Something else. Her voice was hollow. I think I left something behind in that house. I should have taken her to a hospital, a priest, a damn exorcist. But deep down I knew it wouldn't matter. This wasn't something that could be fixed. That night, I barely slept. I sat in the chair by the window, watching the door, waiting for the knocks. But they never came. Instead, just before dawn, I woke up to the sound of whispering. Anna was sitting on the edge of the bed, her back to me, rocking slightly. "Anna?" I whispered. She didn't respond. I reached out to touch her shoulder, and the moment I did, she stopped. Completely. No breathing, no blinking, like a puppet whose strings had just been cut. Then slowly she turned to look, and in the dim light of the motel room, I saw her smile, a wide, unnatural smile, not hers. And then, in a voice that was almost, but not quite hers, she whispered, "It's okay. You'll be with us soon." I don't remember getting out of the room. All I know is that one moment, I was staring into Anna's, not Anna's face, and the next, I was in the parking lot, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The motel was silent. The sky was a dull pre-dawn gray, and then knock, knock, knock. I turned. Anna was standing in the motel doorway, her head tilted too far to one side. Her smile stretched too wide, and she wasn't alone. Standing beside her, identical in every way, was another me. Both of them knocking, knocking, knocking. Both of them waiting. I ran. I don't know how long I drove. Hours? Days? But I never went back. I never saw Anna again. I wanted to believe she was still out there somewhere. Still her, still real. But deep down, I knew the truth. I had left her behind. Or maybe, just maybe, she had never left that house at all. It's been months now. I've changed my name, moved to a new city. I don't talk to anyone. But I know it's only a matter of time. Because at night, when the world is quiet, I hear the knocks. Always 3, always waiting. And one of these nights, I think I'll open the door. I haven't slept in days. Every night the knocking comes. Sometimes it's at the door, sometimes the window. Sometimes, somehow, it comes from inside the walls. But I never answer. Not yet. I tried to run again. Packed up, left in the middle of the night, drove until I couldn't keep my eyes open. Checked into a new motel, used a fake name, paid in cash. Rose, because sitting on the bed, smiling that too wide smile, was Anna. Waiting. I didn't stay long. Now there's nowhere left to go. I can feel them closing in. Every reflection, every shadow, every fleeting glance in a darkened window. They are there. The thing that wears my face. The thing that wears Anna's. They're waiting for me to let my guard down. To make a mistake. And tonight, I think I will. The knocks have started again. Louder this time. More urgent. Knock. I sit in the middle of the room, staring at the door. My hands gripping the arms of the chair so tightly my knuckles are white. Knock, knock, knock. I know what happens if I open it. I know. But the thing is, I don't think I can fight anymore. Maybe I never left that house. Maybe I've been theirs all along. Knock, knock, knock. I stand, step forward, and as my fingers brush the doorknob, I hear a voice, soft, familiar, wrong. It's okay, it whispers. You were always one of us. And as I turn the handle, I realize I believe it. I never believed in ghosts. I still don't, not really. But after moving into the old house on Pine Hollow Road, I started questioning things I once thought impossible. It all started with the whispers. I moved into the house alone, fresh from a bad breakup and ready to start over. It was a great deal, a 3-bedroom Victorian home with more space than I needed. The realtor had seemed eager to sell it, practically shoving the keys into my hand after I signed the papers. Maybe I should have asked why. Maybe I should have cared. But I didn't. The first night was uneventful, save for the usual creaks and groans an old house makes when it settles. I chalked it up to age, to wind, to anything but the feeling that I wasn't alone. Then came the whispers. At first I thought it was my imagination, a trick of my exhausted mind as I unpacked. But as the days passed, the sounds became more distinct. They came at night, just as I was falling asleep. A soft murmur, like a voice pressed against the walls. I couldn't make out the words, but I felt them in my bones. They were pleading. I convinced myself it was the pipes, or maybe even the wind sneaking through the cracks in the wood. I refused to be scared. That changed on the 5th night. I had just turned off the light when I heard it. A whisper, clear as day. Help me. I sat up so fast my heart nearly stopped. The room was empty. The air was thick with silence. My breath caught in my throat. And then, the closet door creaked open. I bolted out of bed, fumbling for the light switch. The bulb flickered before steadying. The closet was empty, but something was off. The walls looked different, scratched, like something had been clawing at them from the inside. I barely slept that night. By morning, I convinced myself it had been a dream. Sleep deprivation, stress, anything to explain what I had heard. But then I found the photographs. They were buried deep in the bottom drawer of the kitchen, hidden under a layer of old stained napkins. Black and white pictures, their edges curled with age. A family stood in front of my house. A woman, a man, and a little girl. The woman's smile was strong. The little girl, her eyes seemed too wide, too hollow. And then I saw the last picture. The family was gone. The house stood alone in the frame, but in one of the upstairs windows, a dark shape pressed against the glass, watching. Something cold gripped my spine. I turned the photo over. Scrawled in faded ink were 4 words, "Don't let her in." I didn't know what it meant. I didn't want to. That night, I locked my bedroom door. I kept the light on. It didn't help. The whispers started again. This time they were louder, urgent. "Help me, please." I pressed the pillow over my ears. My pulse pounded in my skull. Then footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from inside my room. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. The air grew colder, the light dimmed, and then the closet door slammed shut. I must have blacked out because the next thing I knew, it was morning. Sunlight streamed through the windows. The room was still, quiet. The closet door was open. Inside, the walls were covered in scratches, deep, jagged letters carved into the wood. "Help me." I moved out that day, left everything behind. I never went back. But sometimes, late at night when the world is quiet, I swear I can still hear the whispers. And I wonder if I should have listened. I moved in. I left the house, the echoes of those whispers, behind. But even in the safety of another home, the feeling never truly left me. The nightmares followed. The same whispers, the same pleading voice. They came in my dreams, even in the daylight, when I closed my eyes. I tried to forget about the house on Pine Hollow Road. I told myself it was just a bad experience, a fluke. Maybe I was just stressed, haunted by the remnants of a failed relationship. But deep down, I knew the truth. The truth was in the photographs, in the scratches on the walls, in the feeling that something, someone, was still waiting. 2 years passed, and then, one day, I saw the news. A family of 3 had moved into the house. A woman, a man, and a little girl. The house had been sold again. I couldn't breathe when I read it. The house was back in the hands of someone else, someone who didn't know the whispers, someone who didn't know the danger. And the family had vanished without a trace. No sign of struggle, no explanation, just gone. I could only imagine what they had heard. I never returned to Pine Hollow Road, but sometimes I drive by, my eyes darting to that house. I wonder who lives there now. I wonder if they've heard the whispers too. And I wonder, deep in my heart, if I made a mistake. What if I should have stayed? What if I could have saved them? The last whisper, the one that haunted me all those nights, never truly left my mind. Don't let her in. I hope they heard it. I hope they listened. But deep down, I know the truth. Once the whispers start, it's already too late.